Let's look at the fourth passage now. It has been said that knowledge or the problem of knowledge is the scandal of philosophy. Scandal is philosophy's apparent inability to show how, when, and why we can be sure that we know something, or indeed that we know anything. Philosopher Michael Williams writes, is it possible to obtain knowledge at all? The problem is pressing because there are powerful arguments, some very ancient, for the conclusion that it is not. Skepticism is the skeleton in Western rationalism's closet. Now, you don't need to know what skepticism, the school of thought of skepticism is, but skepticism actually starts, or the idea behind skepticism is simply in order to know something, you have to doubt everything you know. And if you doubt everything you know, do you really know anything at all? Okay. Skepticism is the skeleton in Western rationalism's closet. While it is not clear that the scandal matters to anyone but philosophers, philosophers point out that it should matter to everyone, at least given a certain conception of knowledge. For they explain, unless we can ground our claims to knowledge as such, which is to say, distinguish it from mere opinion, superstition, fantasy, wishful thinking, ideology, illusion, or delusion, then the actions we take on the basis of presumed knowledge, boarding a plane, swallowing a pill, finding someone guilty of a crime, will be irrational and unjustifiable. Basically, they're saying, unless you are sure that you're getting knowledge, all the decisions that you're taking upon using that knowledge, those decisions are now circumspect. And therefore, everyone should be concerned about, can we really learn something? Can knowledge really be obtained? The problem with this is the same problem of creation paradox. If at all everything in this world is created and it is created by God, who created God? And if you find that entity that created God, who created that entity? Basically, you can keep on going backwards. You can keep on going backwards, and the question can never be answered because there will always be a backwards. There will always be some entity that is creating it. Similarly, here they are saying, if for knowledge you have to, it is not an infinite AP so much as I can think of it this way. Discount. If discount is given on selling price, if discount is given on selling price, can you see a selling price can never be determined? Because if you have 10% discount, 100 rupees ka selling price, then you get to 90. But now the selling price is 90, so you get to 81. Then selling price is 72.9. Then you get to 65.61. Delhi selling price is even more, even more, even more. You cannot really get to a number. So that way, that is the description, or that is the analog that I can draw. Next, this is all quite serious sounding, but so are the rattlings of the skeleton. See, rattlings of the skeleton. The skeleton being referred to here is the skepticism. Skepticism is the skeleton. That is the skeptic's contention that we cannot be sure that we know anything, at least not if we think of knowledge as something like having correct mental representation of reality, and not if we think of reality as something like things as they are in themselves, independent of our perceptions, ideas, or descriptions. Can you see how they are going about it? This logical fallacy is immense. Basically, reality is something that you cannot perceive. But in order to understand that reality, you have to perceive it. And therefore, whatever you know is definitely a challenge always. Or the skeptic will note, since reality, under the conception of it, is outside our ken. I don't know what ken means, but my best guess would be outside our ability to perceive. We cannot catch a glimpse of things in themselves around the corner of our own eyes. We cannot form an idea of reality that floats above the processes of our conceiving it. Again, the bigger argument being, reality, if it is something that lies outside of our perception, how can we understand reality? Because information capturing for us is through our perceptive senses itself. Okay. We have no way to compare our mental representation with things as they are in themselves, and therefore no way to determine they are correct or incorrect. Okay. Thus, the skeptic may repeat, rattling loudly, "You cannot be sure you know something or anything at all," at least not, he may add, rattling softly before disappearing, "that it is the way you conceive knowledge." Basically, if knowledge consumption happens through your perceptions and reality has to exist outside of your perceptions, there cannot be any interaction between your perceptions and reality. This is the argument being made. Whether you find this argument reasonable or not is not really our focus. This is the argument being made within the passage. There are a number of ways to handle this situation. The most common is to ignore it. Light low itna jaruri nahi hai. This would also be in line with the idea. This would also be in line with the idea. Only philosophers worry about it. While it is not clear that the scandal matters to anyone but philosophers. The rest of the population say, "Hat light lo, kya mazak hai sab." Most people outside the academy, and indeed most of us inside it, are unaware of or unperturbed by the philosophical scandal of knowledge and go about our lives without too many epistemic anxiety. Epistemic is a word that we have covered several times, of or relating to knowledge. We hold our beliefs and presumptive knowledges more or less confidently, usually depending on how we acquired them. I saw it with my own eyes, would be first hand knowledge acquisition. I heard it on Fox News from a reputable source. A guy at an office told me, slightly less reputable, but because I have faith in that guy, I will believe this piece of information. And how broadly and strenuously they seem to be shared or endorsed by various relevant people, experts and authorities, friends and family members, colleagues and associates. If the people around me believe in something, I am more likely to believe in that idea. It is like, how do I put it? If the parents are racists, the likelihood of the child being racist is higher. It is not that it will certainly be there, but the likelihood of the child being racist is higher. Okay. I could have probably thought of a better example, but that is what came to my head. And we examine our convictions more or less closely, explain them more or less extensively, and defend them more or less vigorously, usually depending on what seems to be at the stake for ourselves and or other people, and what resources are available for reassuring ourselves or making our beliefs credible to others. Look, it's right here on the page. Add up the figures yourself. I happen to be a heart specialist. Okay. The way science, although it is not mentioned in passage, but outside of it as well, the way science overcomes these problems or circumvents this scandal is, science does not say this is the reality. Science says this is our conception of reality based on the information we have. For the longest period of time, science believed the smallest particle in the world was molecule, and then more scientific research led to discovery of the atom. Then more scientific research led to discovering of neutron, proton, electrons. Then nucleus ke andar you have quarks, you have Higgs boson particle, fundamental building block of whatever. All of those were scientifically valid statements, because they are not saying this is the end all be all. They are saying, based on the information we have as of now, this is the extent to which we can go to. So that is how science goes about avoiding the debate with avoiding the debate with kya chal raha hai, kyun chal raha hai. Additionally, again not mentioned in the passage, people who seem to hold wildly outlandish claims, ideas like the earth is flat, the earth is flat. One is aju baju people have given you reasons and you find it compelling. The other is some people engage in silliness to garner attention. क्योंकि सुनने में मतलब if you have an outlandish theory, if you have an outlandish conception, तब फिर दूसरे लोग आएंगे तुम्हें ज्ञान देने, and then you can happily tell, अरे नहीं ऐसा है ऐसा है. And even if you find one person on the online believing in what you believe in, then you can always start, मैं अकेला थोड़ी देखो ये भी, that unnecessary drama that happens. But again, these last 2 points that I've informed you of is not mentioned in the passage. It is something that I know externally. Okay. The author of the passage is most likely to support which one of the following statements. For the skeptic, if we think of reality as independent of our perceptions, ideas, or descriptions, we should aim to know that reality independently too. The skeptic is not saying हमें वो भी जानना चाहिए. The skeptic is saying if it is outside of our perceptions and the way we capture information is through our perceptions, तब फिर reality as you define it or knowledge as you define it, something as it is outside of our perception and we capture information via our perception, वो लड़ाई हो जाएगी. तो A, option A remains, but there is a challenge with this. वो ज्ञान नहीं दे रहा कि नहीं वो reality भी जाननी चाहिए हमें. Was simply saying, because we capture information via perception, it is difficult. The actions taken on the basis of presumed knowledge are rational and justifiable if we are confident that knowledge is widely held. Okay. This is not something the skeptic would say. Additionally, this is not even something that is given in the passage. In the passage, it is given, if you are not sure that the knowledge that you hold is valid, if you're not sure that the knowledge that you hold is valid, the actions that you take based upon that presumed knowledge would be deemed irrational. This is not even referenced in the passage. So between the two of them, I would say A survives. Let's look at C. The confidence with which we maintain something to be true is usually independent of the source of the alleged truth. This is absolutely untrue because there was an example of I heard it on Fox News, which was highlighting the source of the information. So it is not independent of the source. If the source is more reputable, we are more likely to believe it. This also goes away. D. The scandal of philosophy is that we might not know anything at all about reality if we think of reality as independent of our perceptions, ideas, or descriptions. This is precisely the scandal of philosophy as referenced in the passage, because the problem mentioned there is, if reality of something is independent of our perception, how do we know that reality? Because our knowledge is informed by the perceptions that we hold. So this is precisely what is the scandal of philosophy. Option D will be the answer. Question 14. According to the last paragraph, we hold our beliefs and presumptive knowledges more or less confidently, usually depending on. This we can actually go back to. We hold our beliefs and presumptive knowledges more or less confidently, usually depending on how we acquired them. Okay. How we acquired them and how broadly and strenuously they seem to be shared and endorsed by various relevant people, experts and authorities, friends and family members, colleagues and relatives. This is the point. So option A, all of the options listed here, we'll come back to it later, of course. How we come to hold them, what was the source, and how widely are they held in our social circles? Yes, we have not mentioned experts and authorities, but how widely are they held? You can potentially say that works. So B right now survives. C, remaining outside the academy, ignoring epistemic anxieties. This is not mentioned. So C is gone. Between B and C, C is worse. And if C is gone, A is also gone. Now comparing B and D, how much of a stake we have in them, what resources there are to support them. This is in reference to how vigorously we argue to inform others of our opinions. We examine our convictions more or less closely, explain them more or less extensively, and defend them more or less vigorously, usually depending on what seems to be at the stake for ourselves. So what we have is not in reference to what is asked in the question. This is for a separate purpose altogether. This is also gone. B survives. B has to be the answer. Let's look at question 15. We cannot catch a glimpse of things in themselves around the corner of our own eyes. We cannot form the idea of reality that floats above the process of our conceiving it. Which one of the following statements best reflects the argument being made in this sentence? Our knowledge of reality floats above our subjective perception of it. The statement being made here is we don't really have a knowledge of reality at all. So when you say our knowledge of reality, the framing of the sentence itself seems a little compromised, but okay. Statement B, our knowledge of reality cannot be merged with our process of conceiving it. Yes. Between the two of them, the the fact or the argument being made in the statement is our knowledge of reality and our process of conceiving it, they cannot be merged together because our process of conceiving it is through our perceptions and ideas and beliefs, and we understand our reality, or reality is defined as something that is independent of our something independent of our perceptions or belief, or क्या था perceptions के साथ कुछ कुछ और था ना. There were three things mentioned there. कहाँ है? Perceptions, ideas and beliefs, शायद ये था. हाँ ये नहीं, perceptions, ideas and descriptions था, ये था. Okay. Between A and B survives. If the reality is independent of our eyesight, logically we cannot perceive our perception. Eyesight, just one mode of perception. Between B and C, B survives. Looking at D, if the reality of things is independent of our perception, logically we cannot perceive that reality. Wonderful. Between B and D, D is also correct. D is also correct. But between B and D, this is a better understanding of what is being mentioned here. The fact that it says merged with our process of conceiving it, is दोनों को मिला नहीं सकते, and of course the framing, our knowledge of reality cannot be merged. Our knowledge of reality, we don't really have a knowledge of reality. That was the entire point being made in the passage. Option D is the better one. In fact, question 15 and question 13 are pretty much along the same lines. Question 16. The author discusses all of the following arguments in the passage. For all of the following arguments in the passage, except philosophers maintain that the scandal of philosophy should be of concern to everyone. This is given in the passage. While it is not clear that the scandal matters to anyone but philosophers point out that it should matter to everyone. This is given in the passage. Skeptics believe that we can never fully know anything if by knowing we mean knowledge of reality that is independent of the knower. Yes, this is what was the answer for question number 15 and question number 13 as well. So both these points have been mentioned in the passage. Option C, if we cannot distinguish knowledge from opinion or delusion, we will not be able to justify our actions. This is mentioned here. For they explain, unless we can ground our claims to knowledge as such, which is to say, distinguish it from mere opinion, superstition, fantasy, visual thinking, ideology, illusion, or delusion, then the actions we take on the basis of the presumed knowledge will be irrational and unjustifiable. We will not be able to justify our actions. This is also mentioned. Last, the best way to deal with skepticism about the veracity of knowledge is to ignore it. The author has said most people ignore it, but whether it is the best way to do it, that is not the contention, or that is not an argument made. The most common is to ignore it. That does not mean it is a better way to deal with it than any other way. So between A, B, C, D, D is definitely not mentioned in the passage, and therefore should be the answer to this question.